The sun had just begun to rise over the sprawling Texas plains when Maya Torres pressed her small hands against the chain-link fence that separated her family's modest home from the vast military base just beyond. The morning light painted the horizon in soft shades of pink and orange, but it was the sound that always caught her attention first, the deep, rolling thunder of helicopter rotors cutting through the air. Maya was only 9 years old, but even at that age, she knew that sound better than the bird song or the distant rumble of traffic. It was the mighty Apache attack helicopter, the centerpiece of the U.S. Army's aerial combat fleet. To Maya, the Apache wasn't just a machine, it was a symbol of power, precision, and daring. A beast that roared with the promise of adventure. Her father, Sergeant Luis Torres, worked as a mechanic on the base. He often brought Maya to weekend air shows, where she would stand on tiptoes to watch the Apaches swoop low, their blades slicing the air as they performed breathtaking maneuvers. She remembered once reaching out as if she could touch the whirling rotors, her heart pounding in sync with the helicopter's rhythmic pulse. One day, she whispered to herself, "I'll fly one of those." At school, her fascination with the helicopters was something she kept to herself. She noticed how other kids made fun of her for wanting to be a pilot. "Girls can't fly combat helicopters," one boy sneered. But Maya never let those words settle in. Instead, she carried a secret notebook filled with sketches of Apaches, maps of flight routes, and little notes she wrote to herself. "Work hard. Prove them wrong." At home, her mother Anna watched with a mixture of pride and concern. "It's a tough world out there, Maya," she warned gently one evening as they sat at the dinner table. "The army isn't always kind to girls who want to break the mold." But Maya only smiled, the determination in her eyes shining bright. "I don't care, Mama. I'm going to fly. I'll make them see." The family had a deep connection to the military beyond her father. Maya's late uncle, Staff Sergeant Luis Ramirez, was a legend in their household, a pilot in the elite 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, better known as the Night Stalkers. He had flown countless covert missions, many of which were never publicly acknowledged. His photo hung in a frame beside the family's worn Bible, a reminder of sacrifice and honor. "I want to be like Uncle Luis," Maya often said, tracing the outline of his face in the photo. Her parents exchanged a glance whenever she mentioned him, a mix of pride and the quiet sadness of a loss that lingered in their hearts. School days were long, and Maya worked harder than most. She excelled in math and science, subjects she knew would be essential for a future pilot. When she wasn't buried in books, she practiced handstands and push-ups in the backyard, building the strength she believed she'd need. But the physical training was just one battle. The other was gaining respect in a world where girls, like her, weren't expected to pilot war machines. One day, during recess, a group of boys surrounded her, challenging her to a race to the edge of the playground. "That you can't keep up," one taunted. Maya didn't back down. She ran harder than she ever had, her legs burning, her breath ragged. When she crossed the finish line first, the boys' faces registered surprise, then grudging respect. That small victory stayed with her, a lesson that determination could sometimes silence doubt. Back on the base, Maya's father had his own battles. Despite his expertise and years of service, he knew the barriers his daughter would face. The army had made progress, but tradition was slow to change. Female pilots were still rare, and Latino women even more so. Yet, every time Maya looked up at the sky and saw an Apache carving arcs against the clouds, her resolve hardened. "She's got the heart of a warrior," Sergeant Torres would say to his wife during quiet nights, "and the stubbornness of a Texas Longhorn." Maya's childhood was a mixture of hope and hardship, of dreams fueled by the roar of helicopters and the quiet reality of the world she lived in. She learned early that passion alone might not be enough. She would need grit, patience, and maybe a little luck, but above all, she knew one thing for certain. No matter what, she was going to fly. Maya Torres arrived at West Point on a crisp autumn morning, the air tinged with the scent of fallen leaves and ambition. The grand stone buildings and neatly trimmed lawns felt both inspiring and intimidating. She clutched her acceptance letter tightly, a mixture of excitement and nerves swelling in her chest. This was the first real step toward the dream she had carried since childhood, to become an Apache pilot. From the start, Maya threw herself into every challenge with relentless determination. The military academy was a world of rigor and discipline, where the strongest thrived and the weakest were left behind. She rose before dawn for physical training, ran laps with the cadets who called themselves the best of the best, and stayed late into the night studying aviation manuals and flight theory. Her instructors quickly noticed her. She had an uncanny ability to absorb complex flight patterns and tactics, and a steady hand during simulation exercises. But the academy was also a microcosm of the military's unspoken hierarchy, where tradition and prejudice lurked just beneath the surface. "You're doing well, Torres," her flight instructor said one afternoon after a flawless simulated Apache mission, "but have you considered transport aviation? The cargo pilots have a steady pace, less stressful." Maya's jaw tightened. "I'm here to fly attack helicopters," she said firmly. He nodded, but the look in his eyes spoke volumes, a silent warning wrapped in polite words. Behind the scenes, Maya could feel the pressure. Some of the senior cadets whispered about her. "She's too small for combat," one remarked. "Not tough enough." They questioned her stamina and her ability to handle high-pressure situations. None of it was said outright, but the implication was clear. The military, for all its progress, was still a man's world. At night, after the cadets had retired, Maya would sit alone in the barracks, her mind racing with doubts she rarely voiced. Was she really strong enough? Did she belong? The answers always circled back to the same resolve. She had to prove herself, not just for herself, but for every girl who had ever been told she couldn't. Her fellow cadets tested her endurance in countless ways. During an obstacle course, a group challenged her to climb the towering ropes faster than any of them. Sweat dripped down her face as she pulled herself upward, muscles trembling, every inch a fight. When she reached the top first, the group was stunned silent. That moment was a turning point, a crack in the armor of doubt. Despite these victories, Maya soon encountered the biggest obstacle yet. When the time came to submit her application for Apache pilot training, she felt a familiar knot tighten in her stomach. She had completed all the required tests, excelled in every evaluation, and top marks. This should have been the moment of triumph. Instead, the response was vague but unmistakable. "We recommend reassignment to support aviation roles." Read the official letter. Transport units, supply runs, medical evacuations, anything. But the Apache. The blow was crushing. At first, Maya kept it to herself, burying the letter deep inside her locker. But the sting of rejection seeped into her bones. The reasons were never spelled out, but she knew what they were. Being a woman in a field dominated by men was still a handicap. Being Latina added another layer of skepticism from those who doubted her place. At the next briefing, she confronted her advisor. "Why not let me fly the Apache?" "I'm ready." The advisor's eyes flicked away. "It's a competitive field. There are many factors, including experience and combat readiness." Maya pressed on. "I'm ready. I've earned this," he sighed. "Sometimes, it's not about what you've earned. It's about what's expected." Maya walked away, her fists clenched, the weight of unfairness pressing down. But deep inside, a fire was kindling. This denial wasn't the end. It was a challenge. If the army wasn't going to give her the chance she deserved, she would make them see her worth. She studied harder, trained longer, and pushed herself beyond every limit. She volunteered for extra drills, took on night flights in grueling conditions, and built a reputation that couldn't be ignored. Word spread among the younger cadets. Maya Torres was unstoppable. But the higher-ups, they remained hesitant, stuck in old ideas about who belonged in the cockpit of the Apache. Still, Maya refused to be invisible. Her dreams soared higher than ever, and she knew one day the world would have no choice but to recognize her. When Maya Torres finally arrived at Fort Rucker, Alabama, the heart of Army aviation training, she expected her hard work and talent to speak for themselves. But what greeted her was a battlefield far different from the open sky she loved. Here, the struggle wasn't just about flying. It was about breaking down walls nobody talked about out loud. Fort Rucker was a sprawling complex of hangars, classrooms, and airfields, buzzing with the energy of young soldiers learning to command the skies. But for Maya, it felt like walking through a minefield of subtle resistance. From the moment she stepped onto the base, Maya sensed an unspoken question hovering over her. Could she truly be one of them? The instructors, mostly battle-hardened men, watched her with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. Some cadets treated her like a novelty, others avoided her altogether. Maya's flight evaluations were as sharp as ever. She excelled in every classroom test, aced the flight simulators, and logged more hours in the cockpit than many of her peers. But something else was happening behind the scenes. Her flight packet, her official file for Apache qualification, was stuck. Paperwork delayed, requests unanswered. Evaluators gave her vague reasons: not combat ready, needs more experience, better suited for support roles. Maya knew the truth. It wasn't her skill or determination holding her back, it was bias, the quiet, insidious kind. The kind that hides behind phrases like fit or maturity, but rarely means not like the others. Her frustrations mounted. She had faced this before at West Point, but here the stakes felt higher. Flying an Apache wasn't just a job, it was a statement of trust and honor. And despite every test she passed, every mission she simulated flawlessly, she was being told, without saying it, that she didn't belong. The hardest moments came during squadron meetings, where senior pilots discussed upcoming missions. Maya would sit quietly, listening to the banter and planning, her ideas often overlooked or dismissed. On more than one occasion, she caught a glance exchanged between officers, a silent conversation about whether she was ready or even allowed to fly combat missions. One day, during a grueling training exercise, Maya's helicopter took a sudden hit from simulated enemy fire. She kept her cool, executing evasive maneuvers with the precision of a seasoned pilot. When she landed, her flight instructor nodded in approval, but there was no celebration. Instead, she was pulled aside for a feedback session. "We're concerned about your approach under pressure," the instructor said, eyes avoiding hers. "You need to focus on team coordination, not just flying skills." Maya left the meeting feeling more isolated than ever. Was it a genuine critique or just another way to keep her out? She couldn't tell. All she knew was that the goalposts seemed to move every time she took a step forward, yet Maya refused to let doubt consume her. She found solace in the few friendships she forged with other female pilots and minority cadets who shared their own stories of struggle and perseverance. Together, they reminded each other that change was slow but inevitable. At night, after the base quieted down, Maya would stare at the tattoo hidden beneath her collar, a small emblem she had inked in memory of her uncle, Staff SGT, Luis Ramirez. The Night Stalker's insignia was a secret talisman, a source of strength she carried with her always. Her uncle had been everything Maya aspired to be: fearless, skilled, respected. His stories, passed down by her family, were legends of bravery and sacrifice. If he had faced impossible odds, so could she. One afternoon, as Maya prepared for yet another evaluation flight, an unexpected comment from a fellow pilot caught her attention. "You're too good to waste on cargo runs," he said quietly. If only the brass saw what we see. Those words sparked a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the tide was beginning to turn, but for now, the war continued quiet, invisible, fought not just in the air but within the minds and hearts of those who held the power to decide her fate. Maya Torres wasn't just fighting for a cockpit. She was fighting for every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. The morning sun filtered softly through the blinds of Maya Torres' barracks room, casting thin stripes of light across the worn wooden floor. It was the kind of day that felt ordinary, but for Maya, it carried a quiet weight of anticipation. A base-wide readiness drill had been announced just the night before, a surprise inspection designed to test pilots and ground crews alike. Today was no different for her. Hours of preparation, stress, and nerves. She stood in front of the mirror, her hands moving briskly to tie her dark hair into a tight bun, the way regulations demanded. For years, she had hidden her identity behind strict uniforms, tucked away every part of herself that could be deemed unprofessional or distracting. But today, something different happened. As she pulled her hair back, a small, previously concealed tattoo was fully revealed on the back of her neck, an insignia of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, known as the Night Stalkers. The black ink was sharp and precise, an eagle clutching lightning bolts, wings spread wide, symbolizing stealth, power, and honor. The tattoo wasn't just decoration. It was a story. It was a promise. Maya traced the outline with her fingertip, feeling the smooth skin beneath the ink, the memory of her uncle stirring deep within. Staff SGT, Luis Ramirez had been more than family. He was a hero, a man whose name was whispered with reverence within special operations circles. He had flown countless covert missions, many so classified they were never spoken of outside tight-knit units, and then, 5 years earlier, he had been lost on a dangerous mission over Syria, never to return. Maya had gotten the tattoo shortly after his funeral, a private act of remembrance and resolve. It was her way of carrying his spirit with her, hidden beneath the uniform, but never far from her heart. But the tattoo was also a risk. In the military, personal expression was often frowned upon, especially for women in combat roles. Tattoos could be viewed as unprofessional, signs of rebellion, or distractions. For Maya, the tattoo was a secret armor, something she hid beneath collars and helmets, something she didn't expect anyone in command to notice today. Though, fate had other plans. The drill began with a series of rapid inspections and unexpected evaluations. Officers moved quickly through the hangars and briefing rooms, marking checklists and questioning pilots. Maya was focused on running through her pre-flight checks when a voice called out behind her. Torres. She turned to see Colonel James Harrelson, a figure both feared and respected on the base. The colonel was a seasoned Apache pilot, a no-nonsense leader with decades of combat missions under his belt. His gaze was sharp as he approached, scanning her quickly before his eyes landed on the tattoo peeking from beneath her collar. "Is that what I think it is?" he asked quietly. Maya's heart skipped a beat. She hesitated, then nodded. "My uncle was a night stalker," she said, her voice steady but quiet. Colonel Harrelson's face softened for the first time since she'd seen him. "Luis Ramirez," he murmured, the name heavy with meaning. "He saved my life on a mission over Syria. I owe him everything." Maya felt a lump form in her throat. For years, she had struggled to make her own way. But here was a man who not only recognized her uncle's sacrifice, he remembered it. "Come with me," the colonel said, his tone now more personal than professional. They walked together, to a quiet office, away from the bustle of the drill. Colonel Harrelson asked Maya to sit as he pulled out a folder from his desk. Inside were mission reports, photos, and commendations, records of Luis Ramirez's courage and skill. "You have big shoes to fill," Harrelson said with a small smile. "But from what I've seen, you're more than capable," Maya nodded. Feeling a surge of pride and hope, for the first time in a long while, she sensed that her journey was about to change. That tattoo, once hidden and feared as a liability, had become a bridge, a connection between past and present, a symbol of legacy and trust. And for Maya Torres, it was the key that might finally unlock the door she'd been fighting to open for so long. Colonel James Harrelson had flown Apache helicopters through some of the most dangerous battles of his career. He had seen pilots come and go, witnessed talent wasted, and watched prejudice block progress. But when he met Maya Torres, something different stirred in him, a mix of respect and recognition that he hadn't felt in years. After the surprise readiness drill, the colonel couldn't shake the image of the tattoo on Maya's neck. It was more than ink. It was a story, a legacy. He remembered the man behind that symbol, Staff SGT, Luis Ramirez, his brother in arms, and the kind of pilot who risked everything without hesitation. Harrelson sat alone in his office, turning over Maya's flight evaluations and reports. She was exceptional, better than many of the pilots already flying Apaches in combat zones. But her file told a different story: delays, vague comments, and a recommendation to assign her elsewhere. He thought back to the old days when merit was supposed to be the only criterion. Somewhere along the way, the system had become clogged with outdated beliefs and subtle biases. That had to change. The next day, Harrelson found Maya on the tarmac, preparing for another simulation flight. The sun glinted off the rotors of the Apaches lined up nearby, the noise mixing with the smell of jet fuel and earth. "Captain Torres," he called, approaching her with measured steps. Maya looked up, her eyes wary but alert. "Colonel, I want to fly with you," he said simply. "Tomorrow, I'll be your co-pilot for the evaluation mission. We'll see if your skills match your reputation." Maya blinked, a flicker of disbelief flashing across her face. "Sir, I don't know if..." "Don't question it," Harrelson interrupted. "This isn't just for you, It's for every pilot who's been underestimated. For every soldier fighting to prove their worth. The next morning, as they climbed into the Apache, Maya felt a nervous energy pulse through her veins. The cockpit was cramped and familiar, but having the colonel beside her made it different. She could feel the weight of his expectations, but also his trust. The mission was complex, a simulated extraction from hostile territory, complete with enemy fire and rapidly changing conditions. Maya's hands moved over the controls with practiced precision, communicating seamlessly with Harrelson as they navigated tight canyons and dodged simulated missile strikes. Through it all, the colonel remained calm, offering quiet advice and feedback. Maya responded with confidence, pushing the Apache's limits without hesitation. When they landed back at base, Harrelson sat back in his seat, studying her with a thoughtful expression. "You fly like your uncle," he said finally, steady, fearless, and precise. "You've got what it takes." Maya felt a rush of relief and pride. This was more than a compliment, it was an acknowledgement she had been waiting years to hear. Over the next few days, Harrelson took steps behind the scenes to support Maya's career. He spoke to the selection board, highlighting her achievements and the success of their joint mission. His reputation gave weight to her cause, breaking through the barriers that had held her back. Still, the resistance didn't disappear overnight. Some officers questioned the colonel's intervention, whispering doubts and voicing concerns about tradition. But Harrelson was unwavering. "We don't need tradition holding us back," he said firmly. "We need the best pilots, no matter their background." Maya felt the tide beginning to shift. Doors that had been closed were now opening, if only slightly. The trust of a respected leader gave her a foothold in a system that had long ignored her. But for Maya, it wasn't just about her own success anymore. It was about paving the way for those who would come after her, the women, other minorities, who dreamed of flying the same path. As she walked across the flight line that afternoon, the tattoo beneath her collar felt like a quiet bond between past and future. Her uncle's spirit was with her, but now so was the faith of a man who believed she belonged in the cockpit. For the first time, Maya wasn't just fighting to be seen, she was being seen. With Colonel Harrelson's support, Maya Torres's path at Fort Rucker began to change, but the climb was far from easy. The army was a vast institution with deep-rooted traditions, and while some doors opened, others remained stubbornly closed. Maya's days grew longer. Mornings started with physical training, sprints, pull-ups, and push-ups, followed by hours in the classroom mastering complex flight tactics, weapon systems, and navigation. Afternoons were spent in the cockpit, where she honed her skills flying the Apache through simulated combat scenarios. Evenings were reserved for studying mission reports and military history. Her dedication was unwavering. She refused to let setbacks shake her resolve. Her fellow pilots noticed the change too. Some respected her more openly now, though a few remained skeptical. The whispers about her ability didn't disappear overnight, but the louder voices were those praising her skill and leadership. One of her biggest challenges came during a joint training exercise with the Special Forces unit. Maya was assigned to provide close air support during a simulated hostage rescue deep in the Mock Mountains. The mission was high stakes, requiring precise timing and flawless coordination. As she maneuvered the Apache through narrow canyons, guiding the ground team with a steady voice over the radio, Maya felt the weight of every life depending on her actions. The simulated enemy fire was relentless, but she remained calm, adapting to the chaos with the skill and poise of a veteran. When the mission ended successfully, her commanding officer praised her leadership. Captain Torres demonstrated exceptional judgment and control under pressure. Her actions contributed directly to the mission's success. Yet, despite the accolades, Maya knew the true test was still ahead, her final evaluation to become a fully qualified Apache pilot. That evaluation was looming, and with it came pressure from all sides. Harrelson continued to advocate for her, pushing for her to be given every opportunity, but other officers remained resistant, clinging to outdated ideas about who was fit to fly combat helicopters. Late one evening, after a grueling day of training, Maya found herself alone in the mess hall. She sipped black coffee, staring at her reflection in the window. Doubt crept in. Was she really ready? Did she have what it took to overcome the final barriers? Then, her phone buzzed, a message from Harrelson. "Remember why you started." "We're almost there." It was enough to steel her nerves. On the day of the final evaluation, Maya climbed into the cockpit of the Apache, her heart pounding but her hands steady. The mission was a complex simulated assault and extraction, designed to test every skill a pilot needed: navigation, weapon systems, communication, and leadership. As the rotors whirred to life, Maya's mind cleared. This was what she was born to do. She flew with precision, coordinating with ground units and other pilots seamlessly. When enemy fire threatened the mission, she reacted quickly, making split-second decisions that saved the simulation team. When she landed, the debrief was tense. The board of senior officers sat around the table, scrutinizing every detail. Maya held her breath. After what felt like an eternity, Colonel Harrelson stood. "Captain Torres has met and exceeded every requirement," he said firmly. "She is ready." The room was silent. Then, one by one, nods of approval followed. Maya felt a surge of relief and triumph. She had done it. Against the odds, she had earned her place as an Apache pilot. That night, she called her parents. "I did it, Mama. I'm officially an Apache pilot." Her mother's voice was thick with emotion. "We're so proud of you, Mihija." But Maya knew this was only the beginning. The real battles, the missions, the camaraderie, the challenges of combat lay ahead. Still, for a moment, she allowed herself to savor the victory. Against doubt, against bias, against every barrier, she had risen. Maya Torres was no longer just a girl dreaming of flying an Apache. She was a pilot, fierce, determined, and unstoppable. Earning her wings as a certified Apache pilot was a milestone that Maya Torres had fought years to reach. But graduation ceremonies and congratulations faded quickly when reality hit. She was about to deploy to a combat zone. Her first assignment was Afghanistan, a place where the rugged mountains and shifting alliances turned every mission into a life-or-death gamble. The base was a sprawling cluster of tents, armored vehicles, and airstrips carved into the rocky earth. The noise of helicopters overhead was constant, a reminder that danger was never far. Maya's first days were a whirlwind of briefings, equipment checks, and meeting her new squadron. The men she flew with were seasoned veterans, some skeptical of the young woman who just joined their ranks. She noticed the sideways glances, the subtle doubts that hung in the air, but Maya didn't have time to worry about acceptance. The mission came first. Her first combat sortie was at dawn. The call came through. Insurgents had taken control of a small village, and special forces units were pinned down. Maya's role was to provide close air support and cover the extraction. As she climbed into the cockpit, the familiar hum of the Apache's rotors was both comforting and electrifying. She checked her instruments, ran through protocols, and took a deep breath. This was what she had trained for: years of sweat, sacrifice, and persistence distilled into this moment. The flight out was tense. The mountains loomed ahead, casting long shadows as the sun rose. Radio chatter crackled with updates and warnings. Maya's hands were steady on the controls, eyes sharp on the terrain below. When they reached the village, the situation was chaotic. Gunfire erupted from hidden positions. Maya maneuvered the Apache with precision, using the helicopter's advanced targeting systems to neutralize enemy threats while avoiding collateral damage. Over the radio, the ground team's voices were strained but hopeful. "Torres, we're moving to extraction point Alpha, cover us." Maya adjusted her position, the Apache's powerful guns sweeping the area. She felt a surge of adrenaline and responsibility. Lives depended on her. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the aircraft. Shrapnel hit the rotor, sending vibrations through the cockpit. Maya's training kicked in. She stabilized the helicopter, communicated damage control to the crew, and continued the mission despite the risk. The extraction was successful. As the last soldier climbed aboard, Maya guided the helicopter out of the danger zone narrowly, avoiding incoming fire. Back at base, the squadron gathered around as Maya climbed down from the Apache, her face smeared with soot but glowing with the quiet pride of a mission accomplished. "Not bad for a rookie," one of the senior pilots said with a nod of respect. But Maya knew the true victory was deeper than praise. She had proven, not just to others but to herself, that she belonged here. She was a capable, courageous pilot, no longer fighting for acceptance, but flying as an equal. The days that followed were a blur of missions, briefings, and moments of stark reality. Maya faced dangers that textbooks couldn't teach, challenges That tested her endurance and resolve. She lost friends to the chaos of war and celebrated small victories that meant survival. Yet, amidst the violence and uncertainty, Maya held on to the promise she made when she first got that tattoo, the promise to honor her uncle's legacy and break barriers for those who would come after. One evening, after a particularly grueling mission, she sat alone under the stars, the quiet hum of the base around her. She traced the tattoo on her neck, feeling its meaning deepen with every passing day. She wasn't just flying for herself anymore. She was flying for every soldier who believed in her, every young woman watching from afar, every family hoping their loved ones would come home safe. Maya Torres had earned her place in the skies, and she was ready to face whatever came next. Months passed since Maya Torres' first combat mission in Afghanistan, and with each flight, her confidence and reputation soared. The initial doubts and whispers that followed her like shadows on the base had grown quiet. Now, the men and women around her saw her for what she truly was, a fierce Apache pilot and a leader. But Maya never forgot the battles she had fought before even climbing into the cockpit, the battles for respect, opportunity, and recognition. The tattoo on her neck, once a secret symbol, was now a quiet reminder of her journey and the legacy she carried. Her squadron had become her second family. They relied on her, trusted her judgment, and often sought her out for advice during tense missions. Maya was no longer the rookie struggling to prove herself. She was a pilot others counted on in the most dangerous situations. One day, during a critical operation to secure a strategic mountain pass, Maya's unit was tasked with providing air cover for a convoy transporting humanitarian aid. The convoy was vulnerable to ambush, and intelligence warned of insurgent forces preparing to strike. As Maya soared above the rugged landscape in her Apache, scanning for threats, her heart beat steadily. Years of training, perseverance, and sacrifice had prepared her for this moment. Suddenly, her radar picked up fast-moving targets emerging from a nearby ridge. Enemy combatants had set up an ambush, firing rockets and small arms at the convoy below. Maya's voice came over the radio, calm but commanding. "All units, hold position. I'm engaging the enemy." With expert precision, she maneuvered the Apache into position, releasing a barrage of Hellfire missiles and coordinating with nearby helicopters to suppress the attack. The sky exploded with controlled chaos traces, explosions, and the roar of engines. Despite intense fire, Maya kept her focus, guiding the convoy safely through the pass. Her actions saved countless lives. The day. When the mission ended, back at base, Colonel Harrelson greeted her with a firm handshake and a rare smile. "You've earned this," he said, handing her a folded flag and a commendation certificate. "You're a trailblazer, Maya. Your uncle would be proud." Tears welled in Maya's eyes as she accepted the honor. This wasn't just about her accomplishments, it was a recognition of everything she had fought for. News of her success spread beyond the base, inspiring countless young women and minorities across the military. Maya became a symbol of change, a living proof that barriers could be broken and dreams achieved, no matter the odds. She began speaking at recruitment events, sharing her story of persistence, courage, and the importance of believing in oneself. Her message was simple but powerful: never let anyone tell you who you are or what you can do. Back at Fort Rucker months later, Maya stood once again in front of a classroom of aspiring pilots. She traced the tattoo on her neck before beginning her speech. "This tattoo," she said, "represents my uncle's legacy, the strength of those who came before me, and the hope for those who will follow. Every one of you has the power to write your own story, one of resilience, determination, and breaking through the clouds of doubt." Her journey from denied opportunities to decorated combat pilot was far from over, but Maya knew she had already made history. She had taken to the skies not just to fly an Apache, but to shatter ceilings, inspire change, and honor the spirit of those who paved the way. Maya Torres' story was no longer about the barriers she faced, it was about the limitless horizon ahead.